Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Chantal Carrington, CEO of Invest Africa. Welcome to today's navigation of digital risk in West Africa. We will explore the strategies for resilience, payments, and innovation. This webinar is presented to you in partnership with Control Risks, and I would like to extend a special welcome to Tom Griffin, partner at Control Risks, where he leads the consulting business across Africa and the Middle East. At Invest Africa, we have numerous discussions about risks with our wide network. There is more of a stereotypical perception that risk in Africa is high. We feel that the tone at the top of risk perception is important to enable a reasonable outlook for the effective hedging thereof. But Tom and the panel are going to focus on the digital risk side, as the rise of digital payments in West Africa is reshaping the region's economic landscape, driving financial inclusion, and increasing access to essential services. But the rapid digital transformation brings new digital risks, from cyber threats to compliance challenges. So Tom, I'm going to hand over to you and the panel to explore how organizations across West Africa can protect their digital assets, secure payments infrastructure, and build resilience in an interconnected digital environment. So over to you, Tom.
Great. Thank you very much, Chantal. And delighted to be hosting today's session it's a really fascinating and very fascinating topic. Just by way of introduction, so my name is Tom Griffin. I'm the managing partner for Control Risk. I'm based in Dubai, but I'd spent 7 years on the ground in sunny Lagos, Nigeria, so very familiar firsthand with some of the challenges that perhaps the esteemed panel will speak around today. Just again, an introduction to Control Risks. So we're a global risk consulting firm. We have 6 offices on the African continent, including two in Nigeria, so one in Lagos and one in Port Harcourt. Within those 6 offices, we're about 400 people, but supporting clients across all 54 countries on the continent. And a great number of those clients are increasingly concerned about cyber and digital risks. And the support that we as an organization play focuses on breach response. We undertake a lot of penetration testing into clients' environments. We are monitoring threats, ongoing sort of digital and online threats. We undertake a lot of crisis management exercises, but a lot of the work that we're doing is just helping companies understand how they can protect their business from cyber attacks and issues. So just to kick off with, I thought maybe a little bit of context to set the scene. So to provide a little bit of background, based on the data that we pick up, we see Africa representing about 5% of the publicly disclosed ransomware and or data extortion incidents. I think one comment would be that we think there is significant underreporting in that regard, and it's likely the number is a lot higher. But actually, we are seeing quite a sharp increase in terms of the number of incidents and growing at quite a steady pace over the last couple of years. And yeah, look ahead into the future. I think this is a very real risk and threat for a lot of companies globally, but particularly in Africa. Just a couple of trends that we are seeing within the marketplace. So one is around the threat actors. As a business, we are increasingly seeing this rapid advancement of deepfake tech that's used when sort of social engineering, and it's already proven very, very effective, particularly for businesses in Africa. And we see that proliferating into 2025. Alongside phishing attacks that are very, very tailored and specific to the recipient. And perhaps some of the panel will chat to that in the session. The other area that we're seeing, and it's particularly relevant to the financial sector, is because is around sort of compliance, resilience, innovation. The financial sector is always the first to be regulated. However, with this recent explosion of innovation in the fintech space, the compliance element and the regulation are a real risk. It's certainly our experience in the sector where we've seen a lot of these companies scrambling to comply after their business has already taken off. And this approach means that companies are engaging with innovators really have to ensure they've got very strict digital security and due diligence that's put in place as part of any sort of joint venture or when they're onboarding third parties as well. Because they do have to comply to both local regulations and also international security standards for fintech. I think the third area is just around the collaborative element. And I think that's a really key part of us being on the call today is that notion of collaboration. And one of the key enablers across the industry that we've seen more and more recently is this sort of sector-wide collaboration. That includes sort of cyber forums, intelligence hubs, committees where traditionally those who've been competing, so banks competing against each other, fintech organizations competing against that, actually starting to come together and share experiences around security. And I think, again, that's a really key component of today's session. And then finally, just around training and education, and a lot of the incidents and the issues that we as a business respond to, they're not so much about technology, they're around sort of fleshware, i.e. people issues. And I think this is a great responsibility of the sector, especially as institutions sort of strive for this notion of financial inclusivity that Chantal alluded to, is really ensuring that end users within their client base and their consumer base are educated against emerging scams, threats that they might have inevitably face. And a lot of what we do for clients, a lot of what clients do for their customers as well is sort of practice that recovery. So cyber simulations, end-to-end recovery tests are always good, really good and strong ways to understand the capability and the resilience of an organization as and when and if things go wrong. So just a couple of areas of context, and I'm sure we'll dig into some of those themes in the session today. And really for us, we will spend the next 30 minutes or so digging into looking at how organizations across West Africa can protect their digital assets, their secure payments infrastructure, and really build resilience in this very interconnected and digital environment. So to do this, I am delighted to welcome an incredibly experienced and well-versed panel. So first off, Lanre Bamisebi, who is an executive director for IT and digitization with Access Holdings. Lanre, do you want to just give 30 seconds overview as to you and your role?
All right, thank you very much, Tom, and to the organizer for inviting me. I'm delighted to be speaking among these very experienced and intellectual individuals. My name is Lanre Bamisebi. I work out of Lagos, Nigeria, and I work with Access Corporation, which is one of the largest corporation in Africa. And basically, what we do is we do banking, pension, insurance, and all those other financial services. My job is the head of technology, and I'll be speaking on some of these very interesting topics. Thank you very much.
Grand, thank you, Lanre. And now to Yemi. So Yemi Keri is the founder and CEO of Heckerbella. Yemi, over to you.
Yes, hi Tom, good afternoon everyone. And thanks for having me on this panel. My name is Yemi Keri, and I run a digital transformation company called Heckerbella. And what we predominantly do is to try and encourage businesses to leverage on technology to grow their business, whatever growth means to them, whether it's expanding to other geographies or the customer base, or what all businesses want to do is grow their profit. And more and more making sure that we build the pool of indigenous technology builders and service providers to serve the country. So that's what I do.
Great, really interesting, and thanks for joining today, Yemi.
Thank
And then
you.
finally, we have Austin Okpagu, who is the country director for Verto Nigeria. Austin, do you want to just give a brief overview as to your role at Verto and a little bit about the company?
Absolutely, Tom. I like the way you called my surname Okpagu, as if you gave that to me, but that's very good. So my name is Austin Okpagu. I lead Verto in Nigeria. So essentially, as a country director, so basically what we do at Verto, we are a cross-border payment company that support businesses in emerging market and globally to be able to trade globally as well as locally as well. So that's basically what we do. So essentially, if you need to be able to move money legitimately as a business from one, point to another globally, that's what we support you as a company. So thank you.
Grand. Okay, Austin, thank you, and delighted to have you with us today. And perhaps before we kick into the Q&A and the questions, just to remind people, if you do have questions that you wanted to ask the panel, please do just click on the appropriate part on the Zoom interface. So perhaps, Yemi, if I open with you, just a very sort of broad question around what are some of the sort of common risks and perhaps unique threat actors and threats that you see in the payment industry, both in terms of like some of the cybersecurity risks and some of those fraud risks as well?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. When one thinks about payments, you might want to think about it like as if it's a singular, one-dimensional, non-complex part of finance, the financial institution. But what it does really is that it drives the economies of the world, or the continent, as it were, and the elements that drive payments are technology innovation, customer behavior, secure and efficient, trusted payments or transactions. And if you look at the combination of these drivers, you will see that, it influences the revolution and the rapid technical changes. In the last 5 years, for instance, the pace of the technology change in payment surpasses that of the last 50 years. And because of all of these evolutions, there are bound to be different kinds of risks. So evolutions, now we have real-time payments. We've had cashless payments, APSs, wallets, name it, cryptocurrencies out of blockchain, open banking. And all of these really do have elements of risks with them. And these risks, you mentioned some during your opening, cyber risks and identity risks are much more prevalent. And so when we're looking at some of the cyber risks, they're the more common ones. You have your data breaches. You have the spoofing. You have the forged identities. You have third-party risks, because as a payment platform, you are bound to interface with other, whether it's the merchants or the vendors or the customers. And so there are endpoints where you have the vulnerabilities. And so those are the kind of risks that we see in cybersecurity. But more importantly are the identity fraud risks, right? And this identity fraud risks are increasing on the continent, and it is making it really difficult for some of the payment platforms to expand globally. Only yesterday, one of my portfolio companies was telling me how IDM and PayPal delisted them and ended their contract because of the kind of volume of payment they were doing. But the fact still remains that there were issues of compliance, right, that they needed to meet. There were issues of regulatory frameworks that they needed to meet, and so that is beginning to tell a lot in terms of how the payment platforms are working and the kind of risks. And the risks are really, really increasing. I'm sure Austin will be able to share some more on this.
Yeah, so I guess that's it. If you've got the sort of payments companies, Austin, you must see your hundreds and many hundreds of transactions going through your books. What are some of the key issues that you see sort of bubbling through from a threat point of view?
Thanks, Tom, and obviously, Yemi, for taking us through that. But I'd like just to emphasize here that the past couple of years, like Yemi rightly mentioned, we've seen a very rapid growth in mobile money, right? We've seen super high growth rate of fintech in emerging market, right? And you just also understand that the digital payment landscape in Africa is unique. It's not the same with the UK or in the US or Europe, if you want to think. And because of this rapid rise in mobile money adoption and agency banking, and this obviously has introduced several risks. One of those risks that is very common in Nigeria is SIM swapping, right? You're seeing a lot of SIM swapping attacks, social engineering, targeting agents, and vulnerability in USSD. And the reason is because there are a lot of the adoption of mobile money in Africa, is still rudimentary. You've seen people who are less tech savvy already adopting mobile money, and this comes with risk. Some of them do not even understand how to manage these risks themselves. And also you're looking at a bit of kind of re-engineering, social re-engineering, targeting agent and vulnerable people within the community, within the society. And this is a big problem, right? Additionally, you also look at the increasing interconnection, right, within international payment systems, as well as local systems. And this, what happened typically is it exposes, payment solution providers, even in Africa, right, to sophisticated threats like account takeover, fraud and malware attacks, right? I think just last year or so, we recorded significant number of malware attacks, not just in financial, within the financial space, also within other spaces as well. And just not to also forget, which is one of the biggest risks today, which is already impacting the usage of cards, is in the area of phishing and card not present fraud, which remain significantly high today. So I would say that these are some of the risks, but common to the region are the ones that I've just mentioned. But obviously, at high level, you do have a lot more risk. Obviously, there are regulatory risk, which Yemi spoke about earlier on, and also those risks also connected with the fact that the way Africa does business today, there are a lot of several regulations around the continent that makes it even much more difficult for these risks to be managed.
Great, and yeah, it's really interesting on that social engineering point of view. We're seeing AI being used for sort of quite negative purposes and driving a lot of that sort of deep fake social engineering as well. So the really good perspectives just to kick off with. Perhaps Lanre, coming to you, I can imagine as sort of a preeminent bank across Africa, you guys have a pretty robust approach to how you strengthen cybersecurity measures, how you sort of ensure more robust and secure digital payments, enhance that level of data protection. What are some of the trends? What are some of the strategies that you as a bank or you're seeing within the industry? We lost Lanre. Okay, if we've lost Lanre, then
no,
perhaps...
I'm here.
Okay,
Sorry
okay.
about that. I think so I was saying that the issue of fraud and cybersecurity across Africa, it's is evolving. When we talk about cybersecurity, you're looking, people seem to underestimate what we're talking about, right? Initially, it's just a group of people, trying to meddle with with other people's funds. But now we have countries, backing organizations to do cyber security, cyber fraud. You have the likes of North Korea, Russia. It's becoming bigger than we all anticipated. With institutions, companies setting up organizations to just try and see how we can infiltrate other countries. And as we look at it, as the world goes on, you find out that over time, Tom, can you hear me very well? Because the way you're squinting, I'm beginning to think.
Sorry. I need to borrow Yemi's glasses. I need glasses.
All right. So you're looking at a world where in another 5 years, war will not be physically people going from one country to the other, but they'll be attacking each other, from a cyber point of view. So that's the level. And you can imagine the amount of billions of dollars that is going into that. So it's Africa, like you mentioned at your beginning statement, that 5% of the issues are around Africa, and I think that will continue to grow. When I look at Africa generally, we are in about 19 countries, most of them in Africa, and the trend of cybersecurity is increasing year on year, right? And some of the things that we're doing is, like every other organization, we are looking at zero trust. Assuming that everybody outside and inside of our network, cannot be trusted, and we just make sure that you verify yourself while you come in. And of course, we are doing a lot around AI and machine learning for fraud prevention, because 80% of fraud, everybody, no matter what you do your transaction on a regular basis, you have a pattern, right? If we understand this pattern using, Gen AI and then other tools, it is difficult. So if we see a pattern that is not common to you, we'll immediately know that this is probably not you. The other thing we're doing is end-to-end data encryption. Now, there's a lot of dilemma there. The Nigerian government, I know very well, is considering open banking, and this will open another flood of possible cyber attack. So what we're doing is also to ensure that there is API encrypting, data encrypting, end-to-end encrypting. Then, of course, as far as the regulatory concern, there is the RegTech for compliance. RegTech solution are being deployed by the regulatory bodies to ensure that they keep the company awake. Now, one other thing that I've always advocated, from the beginning, is that fighting fraud and cybersecurity is a collective effort, right? So, for example, if there's a fraud from bank A to bank B, the money still goes within the ecosystem, right? So if there can be some level of cooperation, within all the organizations to ensure that, when fraud happens, you can easily block it and reverse the money. And lastly, it's also important that we understand, even as Africa and as West Africa, that, because this whole thing around cyber is becoming a warfare, that we should collaborate to have a defense, at the beginning. So, for example, in Nigeria now, you have well over 46 banks, and they all spend billions of dollars in their individual cybersecurity department. But if we could actually have a cyber, as a ministry or whatever it is, to just try to protect everybody. So everything coming into the country, goes through a particular pipe, and is filtered there before it gets into that country. It makes it a lot more difficult for us to have international cyber attack. And lastly, anything around cyber and fraud, a lot of training is involved. People need to train customers. You need to train staffs. You also need to take tech staff as well, because sometimes you find out some of the fraud are internal. And some of these cyber security issues are people clicking on the wrong message, or trying to do the wrong thing, or trying to download the wrong thing. So, like we always say, you're as strong as your weakest link. And we have people in your team that are not well educated or learned or trained on things like phishing scam and those other cyber issues. They need to be trained. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lanre. Very, very comprehensive in terms of the answer. Much appreciated. Maybe Austin, same question in terms of some of those strategies around what you guys are using, and perhaps you're just sort of top three as you see them. Very interested to hear.
Yeah, that's right. So part of the things we're doing, just to build on, Lauren's point, is obviously we also leveraging, two-factor authentication. AI is becoming very relevant now, especially for if you're a cross-border payment company, because the pattern we've noticed the last couple of years is the fact that people are re-engineering their approach to fraud, right? And some of these risks are always evolving, right? From a trend perspective, we're beginning to see increased adoption of behavioral analytics, right, to better understand, customer patterns and detect those anomalies real time, right? And one of the key area as well is, I think Larry also touched on that earlier on. It's in terms of collaboration, right? Which is also very key. Information sharing, between institutions helps identify these emerging threats. So here in Nigeria, I believe I belong to, this group called Fraud and Risk, where all the fintech, decision makers also are in there, where there's a bit of level of information sharing among the businesses, right, within the same WhatsApp group, so to speak. And the reason for that is because collaboration is key. There's no reason for a standalone attempt at resolving, or taking care of these issues as well. Today, we're beginning to see things around, biometrics authentication, because it's also very critical. We've seen a couple of FIs introduce that, and that works like magic, right? Because in a country where, account takeover is like the order of the day, and because of the high rate of adoption of mobile money, a lot of people are still vulnerable. The consumers are still vulnerable. Most of them are not sophisticated. So the approach is to implement solutions or ways in which you can protect them. And so beyond the two-way authentication factor, also ensuring that you identify suspicious transactions real time, and of course the use of tokenization. These are some of the trends we've seen, and we're beginning to see that to a large extent it's also reducing. But that's not to say that that's the complete truth, because if you look at the data for just 2024, we've seen very big financial institutions in Nigeria losing upwards of millions of dollars within the last quarter of the year. And that's to tell you that the risk or the threats keep evolving, and these bad actors continue to innovate, in a way to overtake the innovation, right? So, however, I think that just to round this up, right, I think it's just very important that the actors or players within the space begin to work together collaboratively to be able to solve this and be ahead of the bad actors.
Really, really interesting perspectives, Austin, on that piece, and maybe Yemi, just sticking with this comment around collaboration. I guess how do you, from your purview, see some of those partnerships that Austin alluded to, whether they be sort of financial institutions, agencies from a government point of view, tech providers, maybe even NGOs? How do you see them sort of supporting this digital ecosystem?
This issue is impacting everyone, right? All the players that you have just named. And I know that, for instance, Larry alluded to this collaboration. The Central Bank of Nigeria sort of discloses to all other banks what fraud has happened to another without disclosing which of the banks. So it gives the other bank, all the financial, they share the kind of fraud that has taken place and the impact it has had, so that all other banks can begin to find ways of mitigating that kind of risk. That is some sort of collaboration. There are bodies that are building and jointly building, mitigating solutions for all of the kinds of risks that they have begun to see. But it is very important, that the the government also helps. I know that, for instance, in Nigeria, we have the NITA and the cybercrime act, but in the monitoring and if enforcing of this, it's very important that all parties try and see how they can enforce. If we have all of these policies and these acts and we're not able to enforce, then we're just writing pieces of paper. So I do think that there should be organized units that can actually monitor and make sure that all of these guidelines, acts, and are monitored effectively. I think that would reduce some. I also see, with I'm going to go into the cross-border, free trade zone that the African Union is beginning to think about. And with that also comes a lot of risks, right? Not only cyber, because of all the cross-border trading, but also currency risks, right? That would be part of this. So I believe that the AU is really then pulling together a team of people. There's a committee that is looking at how they are going to ahead of time try and start to see how they can put in processes to mitigate. Otherwise, the cross-border payments situation is just going to continue to dip. So those are the kinds of collaborations we're beginning to see.
Right. Now that's really interesting perspective, Yemi. And you mentioned the sort of government piece and perhaps as well, what are the various regulatory bodies doing in Nigeria, across West Africa. And just before we go to the Q&A, and please do put your questions into the relevant part of the screen. But perhaps Lanre, again, I'm sure you deal very practically with a number of sort of those regulatory bodies, those governments across the region. How do you see those governments adapt to some of these demands of this sort of growing and burgeoning digital economy, and where do you think some of those policy gaps might exist? And yeah, what more can government be doing?
So the government is doing a lot, but like I said earlier, and like alluded to by everybody on this call, the issue of cybersecurity is an urgent issue that need to be addressed, precisely and decisively. So the government is doing a lot, but there's a lot more that can be done. For example, I will continue to emphasize the collaboration part of it, because if there's a lot of collaboration, it will be easier for everybody to be able to, to see what is happening and learn from each other. The other thing that needs to happen is, Africa is very diverse. And there's one thing I've come to realize as I grow in my career, that and having worked across 19 different countries in Africa, is that generally we tend to find it difficult to collaborate, right? If you look at the European Union, apart from the like of UK coming out, it's been really, they've been together for such a long time. The West African Union, even a few days ago, we learned that 3 of them are leaving the union. So it's very difficult for us to collaborate in Africa. And you see, you don't do a lot if you're not collaborating. And if you look at the animal kingdom, right, you find out that those animals that hunt in packs, they tend to do more, they do better than those animals that hunt separately. So collaboration is very key. I can't overemphasize that. Now, in terms of data protection law, I know most of the countries in Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya, they are working on their data privacy. The Nigerian data protection regulation is doing a lot around data protection. KYC, I know each of the countries, they are doing their KYCs, but then there is no standardized KYC. You can imagine if you have a standardized KYC across West Africa. So that means if I went to Kenya, for example, or to Ghana, to open a bank account. I don't have to, I will just tell them, my name is Lanre Bamisebi and this is my number. And they can just use my KYC to open a bank account for me in Ghana, right? You see how seamless that would have been. But, you still have to give them all the document that you give them. So even transferring money, it's easier for me to transfer to the UK and the US than to transfer to Ghana, for example, or to transfer to Gabon, or even to export goods. It's difficult to transfer across African countries. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen there. Now, I know a lot of the banks are going towards open banking, and government is doing a lot to make sure that, they make sure that they tune off all the possible impediment for open banking. But that is also something that they have to do a lot around, like OAuth 2.0 that is being instituted by Central Bank of Nigeria in terms of security framework. So they need to imbibe some of this security framework. Then there need to be a lot of collaboration between the government and private sector. This is very essential if you want to really improve on cybersecurity. Security should be embedded, from the beginning, and also regulations sometimes come in at the end of the day, right? So the rate at which technology is evolving is difficult. I understand with them for regulators to be able to regulate. If you look at what is happening around the world now with AI, the technology is so fast. A few days ago, we learned that to do AI, you need X amount of billions, and some other company came out 2-3 days ago and tell you that you can do it at cheaper, right? So now these are companies that are investing billions of dollars in research and development. Now, regulation companies cannot do this level of investment, right? So they also need to collaborate with the companies to be able to, so as they are evolving, they are also developing the regulations around them. That is the only way I see that regulation can move at par with the rate of development. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, really, really interesting and very comprehensive. Thank you, Lanre, and perhaps hopefully someone from the Nigerian regulators on the call listening. But we've got some really good questions coming through. So keen to turn to some of those. Maybe Austin. So you mentioned this issue around artificial intelligence and sort of machine learning playing a role in detecting and mitigating payment fraud across West Africa. I guess, how are you seeing that play out? What are you seeing as some of the trends around AI being used for good to counter these threats and these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, AI is very significant. In the past, let's imagine that you have 3 people in your compliance team, or the risk manager who needs to manually detect or stay up all night just to detect, fraud or fraudulent transactions. That is not scalable, right? Now, AI is helping to solve that because you're training, the fraud patterns, where you're just using AI agents to be able to stay up 24/7 to be able to detect that. So the speed of detection, right, is super high versus the manual approach, where even though the final gateway will be maybe the head of risk or money laundering and whatnot, but the gatekeeper right now is no longer a human being, and that is very significant, right? By the time you have AI agent doing, for example, if you're a company that does significant number of transactions, let's say hundreds of thousands of transactions, right? With what is happening with the developing AI, what you are simply deploying, this AI agent to be able to not only, quickly detect the fraud or intent to defraud the system or gain the system, you're also helping to put the gate to be able to flag that real time and prevent those transactions. Those are some of the things we're beginning to see. And obviously you might have read recently about several tech companies laying off, their staff or the headcount or reducing headcount. Why? Because of the function of the AI. They're deploying this is faster and is less prone to error, right? Even though human judgment is required along the way, but it's also it's also very critical to ensure that as technology begins to improve, payment companies or tech companies also need to begin to look at what ways can they optimize their internal process to be able to solve this problem, because AI has come to stay, and if you don't adapt very quickly, you might as well be burnt as well.
Thanks, Austin. Yeah, and yeah, the pace of change in this realm is only going to get greater as well as those threats increase. Maybe Yemi or Lanre, just a question for you around where you see the sort of most effective payment companies. What are they doing to sort of counteract this fraud? Clearly there's a massive reputational risk, and that sort of plays out both to customers within the region and on a global stage as well. But yeah, how again, sort of Yemi, in your experience, what are you seeing the most reputable companies doing?
So a lot of the payment companies are investing heavily in cybersecurity, heavily, not only in terms of the ISMS, the standards, but also in the type of tools and infrastructure that they use. Because like you said, it's reputational risk. And not only reputational risk, it's financial risk to them. Because if you have frauds going on, you sort of have to pay up if it's not the fault of, so it reduces their bottom line. So they're doing a lot, and some of them are using the double-edged sword. That means that even though they have internally invested and have implemented tools for cybersecurity and the standards, they are also leveraging and outsourcing some parts to the SOCs, where that can monitor on a 24/7 basis to help them reduce the kinds of fraud, or to quickly detect those types of frauds.
Thanks, Yemi. And I know that we're slightly sort of bumping up against time. So maybe, Lanre, just another question for you. So within those sort of emerging threats, or ever emerging threats and issues, from a consumer point of view, so from an individual point of view, how are you guys at the bank advising that individuals can better protect themselves against some of these evolving issues and risks?
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's becoming very complicated. You started this conversation by mentioning around deepfake, right? So, for all of us on this call, it will be difficult to go through us with deepfake. But as data, as banking is becoming very essential to the day-to-day living in Africa, there's a lot around banking inclusion. The government is driving banking inclusion. So you have people who are not very tech savvy in tech having to use mobile to do transfer. So there's a lot of danger in there, because people can use their trust, the trust they have in the organization to actually get them. I remember back when I was in Nairobi, almost every month there is over 40-50% increase in the number of social engineering fraud that is being perpetrated. Because, as soon as you're leaving the bank to go do something, somebody's going to call you from the bank saying, "Oh, Tom, you just left the bank. My name is, something, if I'm calling from the bank. I want to find out if you had a good experience." Now, the person knows that he just left the bank and is wondering, "Oh, okay, it's obviously the bank." And before you know it, they take you off your PIN and all that. So it's so difficult to monitor. Now, Austin mentioned something around, using artificial intelligence to also block, fraud. But again, that leaves you another problem, because the same artificial intelligence, can also be used to say, for example, an algorithm that can guess a password, right? It will do it better than your normal regular system. So with the AI also come another big headache, for consumers. So I think, in my own opinion, for the consumer, they need to be extra careful. One of the most important things is they need to make sure there is validation, and they also need to if you're not sure, call someone, right? Somebody is asking you for PIN, you're not sure, and the institution as well need to do a lot of education, right? Even the regulatory body need to do a lot of education, telling people, putting out their use cases. And like, I think it was Yemi that mentioned that, you know, if organizations get to know what is happening within the other organization. So for example, if I get social engineered, right, and I tell the central bank, for example, they should be able to make that known to everybody, so that not that particular mode of social engineering me will not happen to somebody else. Because everybody is keeping a secret. The person that is social engineered is trying to not look stupid, right? And the bank that was robbed of 12 billion naira is trying to keep it quiet because they don't want their customers to feel that they are not good with their server. So everybody is keeping it secret. And when you keep something secret, you can learn from it, right? So I feel, you know, that will also need to happen. If like everybody is saying now, you see something, you say something, you know, you're robbed, you lose your money, talk about it, put it on the social media, let other people know about it so that they don't fall victim. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, really interesting, Lanre. And yeah, a lot of the cases that we deal with, the issue is the sort of, you know, first 48 hours spent with people trying to cover up the issue and manage it themselves, as opposed to manage it as a crisis or as a cybersecurity issue. So thank you, Lanre. Thanks, Austin, and thank you, Yemi. That was fascinating. I really enjoyed that, and just tremendous amounts of, I guess, experience, but also institutionalized knowledge from the three of you. So thank you for your insights. Thanks for your input. I'm sure all of us would love to continue the conversation. So do feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or via email. Yeah, very happy to continue that conversation as might be appropriate. But Chantal, I see you just popped back up, which signifies we have to close the session. So thank you very much to Invest Africa on behalf of Control Risks, but also thanks to our esteemed panelists, Yemi, Austin, and Lanre. Chantal, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much to our sterling moderator, Tom, and also a sterling panel, Yemi, Lanre, Austin. I think we had a riveting discussion here. And as you said, Tom, there's lots of questions. I think some of them actually need a little bit more time. And it would be great if we can maybe take those offline. So reach out to Tom or let us know if we can connect you on that. But that then brings today's webinar to an end for now, navigating digital risk in West Africa. But we also look forward to seeing you in London on 2 July this year for the 11th Annual Africa Debate, where we can continue the discussion in person on digital risk. So for now, thank you for your investment of your time and your effort in Africa. And until next time.